And then I would like to move to introduction of Ann and Bob. I plagiarized some from, and there's an article called Enlighten Me, Newark Union Cemetery by Larry Nagengast of the Delaware Public Media. It was published in August of 2021. So I'll just do a quick read here. Forgotten by some and overlooked by many more, Newark Union Church and Cemetery is now getting fresh attention due in large part to the efforts of Bob and Ann Daly, who last year took over as president and treasurer of Newark Union Corporation, the nonprofit responsible for both the cemetery and the adjacent Newark Union Church. The church, a non-denominational house of worship with Quaker roots, was built in 1845 and has been largely unused for the past 50 years. Both the church and the cemetery are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Daly DuPont Company retirees who moved into a house across the street from the church 3 years ago are now managing the transformation of the church into a meeting and event venue and a restoration of the cemetery, whose most obvious needs were repairs to portions of its stone walls and raising more than 200 fallen headstones. The Dalys took over leadership of the corporation from Ray and Jean Weldon, part of an old Brandywine 100 farming family whose name is attached to roads, housing subdivisions, and at least one historic home in the area. Since then, Ann and Bob have been very actively addressing deferred maintenance of the church building and cemetery, along with introducing improvements such as a new military memorial. They'll describe this in more detail, along with making some links to Aldersgate for our interest. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find a lot of details at the church about the transition from Newark Union to Aldersgate in 1951. So if anyone has any information about that, let me know, and I'll pass it on to Ann and Bob.
Okay.
I would say, please hold your questions until the end. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. But I guess if somebody has a burning question, we don't have so many people here that we couldn't stop. And so
Okay.
now I'll turn this over to Ann and Bob. Welcome, Ann and Bob.
Well, thank you. We're excited to be able to share this with your group. So thank you for inviting us. Thank you for the nice introduction, Martha. We definitely do want to acknowledge the whole board of directors of the Newark Union Church and Cemetery, because they have been very instrumental, each one in their own way, of working here, supporting the work, and of course making the major decisions to do the things that we do here, the restoration and the services of the cemetery. So I'm going to hopefully share the screen that we have. Yes. And I will start the slideshow.
Okay.
Okay. Can everybody see the slide that we put up?
Yes.
Okay, this is a picture of the Newark Union Church from the view from the cemetery. So the Newark Union Church and Cemetery, it's not in Newark, as most of you know. It's in the heart of Brandywine 100.
Right.
And as you see here, this is where the church and cemetery are. And this is Philadelphia Pike, just to give you an idea. This is Marsh Road. Granted, this map is from 1868, but these are the roads that we all are familiar with now. And sorry, this is Concord Pike and Tallyville, and of course, Aldersgate Methodist Church is in this area here. So the property where the Newark Union Church and Cemetery sits is part of a land grant that Valentine Hollingsworth received from William Penn back in 1682. And this is a diagram of that land grant. On the south side, it's bordered by Bader Boulevard, which was then called Carr Road. Then also on the east by Shell Pot Creek. To the north from the Red Oak to the Black Oak is the northern border, and that is actually where Wilson Road is now. Goes all the way out to Concord Pike. So the western border is, part of the western border is on Concord Pike. So this is the total land grant, but as you see, it had been divided at the time that this diagram was made. It's showing 200 acres that was given to Thomas Hollingsworth, Valentine's second son. And he called his area Liftwood. And it is the acreage where Liftwood Estates is, and Liftwood and some of the Weldon named developments.
That's cool.
Henry Hollingsworth is the oldest son. He also got 200 acres. And then when Valentine Hollingsworth passed away, he also became the owner of an additional portion. You can see here, this is where Newark Union Church and Cemetery is now. But this portion that Henry inherited, he later sold to George Robinson, who had married their sister, Catherine. And this property actually on this corner is, again, adjacent to Concord Pike, and that's where Lombardy Hall is. I think a lot of you probably know where that is. And
Okay.
Okay, so George Robinson, that property was originally owned by Valentine Hollingsworth, then Henry Hollingsworth, then George Robinson and Catherine. Then further on down several generations, Hannah Robinson sold the property to Gunning Bedford, and that's what most folks relate Lombardy Hall to, is Gunning Bedford. So the land is actually, and this is a historical marker that's at the stop sign at where Newark Union Public Road comes off of Baynard Boulevard. And as you see, this was the 5th historical marker that was placed in Newcastle County. And it describes some of the earliest Quaker activity here in Delaware. But as you see, where did the word, the name Newark come from? Well, Valentine Hollingsworth named his plantation, his 986 acres, Newark. And of course, then over the years, it derived to Newark, to Newark, and Newark is 2 words, and the 1 word, Newark. As Martha mentioned, the property has been listed on the National Register of Historic Places back in February of 2020. And the research that went into providing the packet that was submitted to first the county, then the state, then the federal National Park Service. This work was done by the Center for Historic Architecture and Design from University of Delaware. And that team did the research was led by Andrea Malhallo, and also other team members were Michael Emmons and Catherine Morrissey. So their work led to the registration on the National Register of Historic Places, and also supported the verbiage that was used to help us to get another historical marker placed, actually up by the cemetery, close to the cemetery and church. And that was placed in December of 2020. And so actually in the inset here on the lower left corner, you can see Andrea standing closest to the marker, and she and Kathy Cloutier, who was the state senator at the time, and she funded the marker. Andrea and Kathy Cloutier actually did the physical unveiling of it, and then but Michael Emmons and Catherine Morrissey, shown in the picture, were also in attendance. So the Newark Union Church and Cemetery now sits on about 200 acres in between the cemetery itself is 2 acres, and where the church sits is an additional ½ acre. And the orientation here is the church is on the south side of the cemetery. So it extends to the north, but to the west is the development of Welshire. To the east is the development of Normandy Manor. This here is a picture of the church when it was built in 1845. And it was built as a meeting house, fields made of the fieldstone of the area. And as you can see, this is the south face, and there's a main entrance there on that side with squared off windows and a second story. We don't have too much information of what the inside looked like. We only have this picture here. which was given to us by, the picture was given to us by Ray and Jean Weldon, and the woman standing there is Miss Emma Weldon, and the picture itself was taken in 1890. So we only have this picture and one other picture, which is taken from the north side, so from the cemetery side of the, it shows the church, excuse me, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So like I said, these are the only two photos we have of the building. Way back then, we have no pictures of the inside. But you also see that there's a chimney in the middle, which most likely was a wood stove. And as typical with a Quaker meeting house, the men would have entered on one side, which is probably this side, and the women would have entered on the opposite side. And the inside probably, we don't know for sure, but most likely had a partition down the middle with the panels that raised up and down, so the worship can be conducted in a typical Quaker manner. But then it was also, the building was also used by many of the other religious groups in the area, Protestants, Methodists, Episcopals, and such. And okay, then in 1906, or let me back up, in 1888, the congregation was primarily Methodist at the time, and they petitioned to the conference, the Wilmington Methodist Episcopal Conference, and then they became an official Methodist church congregation, although the church building itself still was owned by the community. So here you have a picture of the 1906 renovation, where the entrance was moved from the south side to the east side with a vestibule. The windows were redesigned into the large Gothic revival style windows, and the exterior fieldstone was stuccoed and whitewashed.
About that.
The picture in the bottom right corner is the way the church looked earlier this summer.
Okay.
The interior of the church, the only picture we have of it since the renovation is what you see here. You can see there's carpet on the floor. It's been removed, but the pews are there. You can see on the left side, there is a piano. On the right side, there was an organ. There was the hymn board. There's also altar chairs and a pulpit and a communion.
Oh, wow.
So we have most of the, we have the altar chairs and the pulpit. And of course, all the pews are there intact as well. So you can see down here on the bottom, on the right side, is a picture taken earlier this year, and what you see there. So we're going to be restoring this church, and we're going to pretty much try to get everything back the way it was. Although we're not going to put the carpet down on the floor because it's the wood floor is so beautiful. We're going to restore it as is. And we do have the pulpit. The pulpit was restored earlier this year. It was broken and cracked in a couple places, but it was refurbished by New Life Furniture Solutions. And then we also have the 3 altar chairs. They are currently being restored by George Hoffman, who lives over in Liftwood, and we're going to have them reupholstered in red crushed velvet. And we do have a signboard that we have hanging up on the wall in there as well too. So just a few calendar milestone points is in 1845, the construction began on the public meeting house. And so that it was used on Saturdays as a meeting place. Actually, Union meant community then. So it was the Newark community or Newark Union. They would meet there on Saturdays. You would bring your chickens, I'd bring my peaches, and we'd exchange, or we'd sell them and give the money to the church, or the meeting house rather. Then in January of 1846, it was actually dedicated as a place of worship.
Mm-hmm.
Then, as I mentioned, in 1888, in March of that year, the Methodist congregation was accepted into the Methodist Episcopal Conference as the Newark Union Methodist Episcopal Church at Carcroft. Then in 1906, the building was renovated. And then that Methodist congregation was there until 1951. They outgrew the church, as well as a lot of the community was being built up. The housing community was being built up over there on the other side of Concord Pike, and the congregation wanted a church closer to where the majority of the folks lived. So they built the Aldersgate Methodist Church, and they had their first service there in November of 1951. Dr. Gerald Foster was the minister for that first service. So at that time, the church was then used by several non-denominational congregations for short times, the last of which is the Shelburne Bible Church. Now they moved down the hill. Actually, at the time, they were called the Newark Union Church, but they ended the lease in 1970, which was only $1 a year, and moved to a building just down the hill from the Newark Union Church. They dedicated a new building there in 1970 and moved into that building there. Since then, it has been vacant and was actually shuttered, and the electricity was disconnected to it. And there was a lot of decisions as to what to do with the building. But we now have a very passionate vision by the board of directors and many people that support the vision to have it restored and opened up again.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. So then some notables that are in the Newark Union Cemetery that actually are connected to Aldersgate Methodist Church. I got this information from the notes that Martha shared with me from your historian and other folks there in the church. So Bessie Graff is laid to rest here in the cemetery, and she was related to Adam Sharpley, who owned the land where the Aldersgate Methodist Church was first built.
Okay.
Then the memorials described, and so in memory of Reverend James W. Talley, Mrs. James W. Talley, a communion rail in the first church was dedicated in memory of them. There was one pew at least donated in memory of Mr. Fred Graff, and there was a vase, probably used on the altar, I'm assuming, by Mr. Lawrence Miller. Again, these folks are laid to rest here in the cemetery. Then there was a comment made about in February of 1958, the Reverend and Mrs. No, not the Reverend, the Mr. and Mrs. Vinyl Hills Jr. donated 15 hymnals in memory of the Reverend and Mrs. Vinyl E. Hills. The Reverend Hills actually participated in the groundbreaking ceremony when the Aldersgate Methodist was first built. I think the groundbreaking ceremony, groundbreaking occurred in 1948, I think it was, but about shortly, or maybe 1950, and then of course the church opened in 51. But again, all four of the Hills family members there are also rest in the Newark Union Cemetery. So we have started a lot of restoration on the church. We've done some of the cemetery as well, and Bob will describe that shortly. So this is a picture of the church as we started restoration this year. We've had the roof replaced with cedar shake shingles. And we are currently, then we had the stucco repaired, and we've had some windows replaced, and actually the painting has started, and things are moving along quite excitingly.
Yes.
So here you can see some of two of the windows that have been replaced. The wood itself was in really good shape. A lot of the glass was broken, although there is several panes still intact, such that the gentleman, Dave Thorngate, who is doing the restoration work, he thinks he can save enough glass to do one and maybe two windows in the actual original glass. But there was two patterns, one of which is still made in reproduction glass. So that's what you see here in the lower left.
Okay.
It's called a snowflake pattern. So all the glass will be like that, and the original glass will be like that too, as well too. So it'll all match. The picture on the bottom right is from the inside, looking out. And then, and as you see here, this top left is looking at the church with the lights on from the inside. So you can imagine what it's going to look like when it's all three of those windows are replaced.
Mhm.
We have put candles in the windows so they can be lit at night, and it's just exciting. Can't wait to see what it'll all be look like when all of the windows have these types of candles
Mhm.
soon. Again, just to describe the restoration progress we've made on the church so far in 2020, we had the electric service restored to the church, and we were able to do that graciously by the grant that we received from the Delaware Preservation Fund. Then in 2021, we focused on the exterior to protect the envelope, they say.
Mhm.
So in June, we had the chimney repointed and capped. We had the cedar shake roof installed in July with assistance from a grant from the Welfare Foundation, one of the DuPont family funds. And then the first Gothic window was installed back in July. And that restoration was funded by personal funds from Kathy Cloutier. Then in August, we had the soffit repaired and the stucco repair started. And then in September, the exterior painting has begun. And the second Gothic window was installed in memory of Danny Catharino, a good friend of ours who was very supportive of the restoration of the church that we've done. So in October, the gutters will be installed and the vestibule will get new clapboards. So we're moving right along. Then moving forward in 2022, we hope to begin restoration on the interior. Now the property, we have enough funds to maintain the property currently, mow the grass, pay the insurance, pay the electric, but to do these major restoration projects, we need to pursue grants and contributions. So if we have applied for a grant this fall already, and if we're fortunate enough to get those funds, we'll move forward with this plan. So we're going to remove the ceiling. There's plaster lath and ceiling tiles in the ceiling, but it just doesn't look quite right when you see everything else, how everything else is coming into place. So the ceiling is going to be removed to expose some hand-hewn beams that are up there. The plaster walls will be patched and painted. The pews will be refinished. The wainscoting and floors will also be refinished, and we'll have to have an HVAC system installed. Then in 2023, we hope to have the church open to the public as a museum, and the museum will focus on aspects of Brandywine 100, especially the prominent families that have ancestors laid to rest in the cemetery. And you can walk through the cemetery and you see all the big names. So the big prominent families here, the Talleys, the Weldons, the Carrs, the Sharpleys, Pierce, Forwood, and such. So the museum will have a portion of it focused on that. And then also of Americana of the late 1800s, when the time the church was built. Then also we have veterans from every war, from the Revolutionary War all the way through to Vietnam. So we would just have some museum exhibits discussing those wars and the veterans they have and the parts that they played. Then we also could have memorial services and funeral services, because we do still have plots available in the cemetery community.
Cool.
And then also some small weddings. We've actually been approached to ask if small weddings could be held here. So that's our hope. And that was actually Bob's first vision for the restoration, to have weddings held there. So this is a picture of the hand-hewn beams that are in the ceiling or above the ceiling. You hear that now these look, the sunlight coming through here is this is a piece of the board that was taken off that had to be replaced before the shingles were put back on. So it looks like this is new wood, but it's not. It's just the sun shining in. So you can see these are hand-hewn beams with some notched side supports put in it, and behind it you can see the stone wall. So it'll expose the interior of the stone wall, and we'll have all the plaster lath that's below it here all removed. So we're excited to do this because that'll be the only interior architecture feature that we'll be able to show from the original 1845 building. Everything else will be from the 1906 renovation. So that's all we have about the church right now, and I'm going to turn it over to Bob so that he can talk about the cemetery.
Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm going to talk about the cemetery. So, 1/2 acre was donated by Valentine Hollingsworth in 1687. The cemetery, the entire cemetery, has over 900 burials dating back to as late as the 1600s.
Wow.
Many prominent families, as Ann mentioned, from Barry 100, Tallies, Weldons, Carrs, Grubbs, Wilsons, pretty much all the road names that you know up in this area. And the cemetery was expanded on November 11th, 1897, when 1 acre was purchased from Clark Webster for $500 from the will of Rebecca Forwood. So there's a Forwood name. And so that's what we refer to as the newer section, although that has American Civil War people buried over there and from the late 1800s. So it's the new section when you compare it to the 16 and 1700s. So the New York Union, you saw the historic sign. It's down at the bottom of the street. This land was deeded to Valentine Hollingsworth by William Penn in 1687. And then Valentine donated the first acre for the cemetery. If right as you walk up to the church, the wall right on the right, there's a date stone. You'll see right up in here, the stone here, it says CR 1787. That is Charles Robinson, who was Valentine Hollingsworth's great-grandson, and he was a mason. So we found documentation that he was here in 1787 restoring the stone wall. So there's all kinds of little things like this in the cemetery that we're uncovering every time we do something. There's lots of early stones. 2 of the earliest that we found are actually field stones. So nobody was making headstones back then. The one on the left is Alice Beeson, and we have information right there about her. She died in 1759. The Beeson family is one of the prominent families in the area. Last year, when we were raising headstones and footstones, we found the one on the right. And we found a bunch of stones, but this was the only one that was hand chiseled, and it says EB88. And when we did the research, this turns out to be Edward Beeson, and this was Alice Beeson's son.
Okay.
You can hit the arrow key already.
One of the things that the board is doing is we're making historical connections to the area of people buried in the cemetery. So there's a whole list, and we barely scratched the surface, but here's a handful of them. Some of you may know where the Bird Husband house is. It's now the home of the Delaware Greenway. That was the home of the Bird and then the Husband families. We have many people that worked at the DuPont gunpowder mills at Hagley. George and Joseph Miller is just an example. Mount Pleasant Meeting House, which is down on Philadelphia Pike, that land was donated by George Cartmel to build the meeting house. Chester Bethel Church over on Falk Road, one of our original builders of the church in 1845 is buried over there, Louis Sebley. We have 2 of our 7 American Revolutionary War soldiers that fought at Brandywine Battlefield, and we're figuring that there's probably going to be 3 or 4 more because they were all in the same chapter. The Weldon House on Philadelphia Pike, which is now being restored, had many generations of the Weldon family there. Old Swedes Church, we have, this would take probably an hour to give you all the names. So I just picked one, but many people who are baptized and married at Old Swedes Church that are in the cemetery. And one of the tallies, what's one of the earliest, was baptized in 1754. We're figuring that when we go to Old Swedes Church and get more records, we're going to find just an incredible amount of information. A few more, the Calamar Nickel. So Catherine Mousley, her name was Polson, is a direct descendant of the original Swedes that came to Delaware over on the Calamar Nickel. Blue Ball Barn, which you know is right up on Concord Pike. George Miller Sr. of Miller Road. was the innkeeper, and his son George was born in the inn when it was an inn. Fort Delaware, George Weldon guarded Confederate soldiers there during the Civil War. The Forwood School, which I guess recently got taken down, that was over on Silverside and Marsh. We have 3 of the people who helped build that one-room schoolhouse in 1799. It's a shame that that's now gone.
Yeah.
Mount Salem Cemetery, George Miller ran the cemetery.
Mhm.
Green Hill Presbyterian Church, which is over by Tower Hill. George Miller helped build the church in 1848. So you can see these people were not only doing things locally, but they were doing stuff all over Brandywine 100.
Mhm.
And one other one I'll mention is the Rockwood Bringhurst farm, which is Rockwood Museum now. Lucian Anderson was the gardener on the Bringhurst farm. We have since uncovered a few more, but I don't have them on the slide. But this is going to continue. It just shows you that these people in Brandywine 100 were really just doing everything.
Mhm.
They weren't just sitting there working their own farms. They were volunteering everywhere. We have 7 American Revolutionary War patriots buried here. We actually have 8, but there's one that we don't know where he is, but everything we've researched finds him in here. But we have not found his site yet. So here's 3 of them: Thomas Cartmel, Thomas Babb, who was one of the Brandywine battlefield patriots, and George Weldon. Then there's Andrew Gibson, Elijah Davis, and Jacob Weldon, who was George's brother. The missing patriot is Eli Weldon. So there were 3 Weldons out of the 8 that we have that were patriots. And I'll focus on one more because this, out of the research we've done, this is by far at this point our most interesting. So this is George Mousley. And George Mousley wanted to sign up as a patriot, but his mom and employer were Tories and supported the British. So he wasn't allowed to sign up as a patriot. So his employer had a horse-drawn cart loaded with flour and wanted him to deliver it to the British troops. And George decided, no, I'll deliver it to Washington's troops and I'll sign up. So that's what he did. We think that there's a lot of Mousleys buried over at Chester Bethel. There's a few newer Mousleys in the new section, but all the older Mousleys of his time period and a little later are over at Chester Bethel. And we kind of wonder a little bit if maybe, he was kind of not accepted by the family anymore because he signed up because they supported the British and he supported the Patriots. So more research has to be done. And then at age 55, what makes him really amazing, he wanted to do something because here come the British again in the War of 1812. And George, we found documentation that he worked with the DuPont family to obtain explosives from the newly operating powder mills. So DuPont powder mills started in 1802, so they're only about 19 years old. And he transported explosives between the American camps that were fighting down in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. at age 55. So he is one of our favorite patriots.
Yes.
Favorite people and most interesting people. We have veterans from the Revolutionary War through Vietnam. So here's just examples. We have 3 War of 1812. We have 7 Civil War. We have 3 Spanish-American War, a whole handful of World War I's. World War II is obviously the most. We have Korean War and we have the Vietnam War. So we have every war represented in the cemetery. We currently have 69 veterans that we know about, but
wow.
Every single month we get more. This month we just had 66. Now we have 3 more. We're up to 69. When we took this over in January of 2020, we had 39. So we've added 30 to the list, and this will just keep going up as more research is done. We have a few programs that we've already started at Newark Union, which have been a real big success. One of the ones was Veterans Day. So we, through a neighbor of ours, we contacted Immaculate Heart of Mary, which is right up here on Banner Boulevard and Shipley Road.
Mhm.
And the 7th graders came down from IHM to put the flags in the grave markers to honor all the veterans in our cemetery. The teacher brought them down. They could, because of COVID, they couldn't get on buses. They couldn't do field trips. So they actually walked down through Wellshire and came through. And the teacher, after they were done putting all the flags to honor the veterans, then he gave them a scavenger hunt, an historical scavenger hunt of local prominent families in the cemetery. And then they had to go back and research about those families to learn
Wow.
about their area. So we thought that was good.
Yeah.
They are probably coming back again every single year. It was such a hit.
Mm-hmm.
The other program that we started last year was Wreaths Across America. So this is a national Wreaths Across America Day that's held at over 2,000 locations. And basically what you do is wreaths are delivered all across the country, and then you have volunteers come and place the wreaths on all the military veterans' graves. This was a huge success. We could only have family members show up. We couldn't open it up to the public because of COVID, but we had a lot of family members show up. They had purchased wreaths and they got to lay the wreaths on the graves of their family members. The man on the left is our favorite veteran that's still living. He is actually a veteran of World War II and Korea. He's 95. He showed up with his family, and we asked him to place a wreath on the fence. You place one wreath in honor of all the services and all the veterans. And he placed the wreath on the fence, and then he stood back and and saluted. And I can tell you, it wasn't a dry eye in the cemetery when he did that. Just an amazing man. He comes and visits a couple times a year with his family. In fact, his family, I'll show you the military memorial that we designed. And his family donated the flagpole, solar light, and installation to put at this military memorial that we made. So just an amazing family that we enjoy. And these are just some pictures of the wreaths that we got, that the Wreaths Across America delivered to us. Oh, by the way, his name is Watson Day. So again, the Day family is a prominent family that's been around in Brandywine Hunter for hundreds of years. Here's the military memorial we've mentioned. So these two pictures are what it looked like. The main road into the cemetery just dead-ended. We put the fence in, and then we started busting up the macadam. And this is what it looks like now.
Now, I'd like to interject there that busting up macadam is really Bob. The rest of us move it around, but he's doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is what it looks like. The flagpole will be right behind the fence. And right up front, we also are getting a stone with 5 medallions of the branches of the military that will be right on there. And it'll be a thank you to all the veterans who have served in all the wars. So those two items should be coming in October, but quite a difference from that to this. And it's everything we're doing here is handicap accessible. So this is where a handicapped person could go around and look at the flowers and things. We put benches in, have a quiet moment. Other projects, we had the wrought iron gate. They're the originals. We had them restored. We've also been lifting headstones and footstones. We lift the ones that are underground, but there's a lot of them here that are broken and laying on the ground. They should be standing up. So we had professionals come last year, and they repaired and restored 70 headstones. And the one here on the right, you can see it had a crack in it. That one looked like this one here looked like this beforehand. And they stood it up, put it in the base. They dug down, found the base, put it in the base, and then restored it. So now we have a whole team of people that are cleaning them, so you can now read all the writing on them. So it's really been a nice project. Here's an example of 3 footstones. These were little kids that passed away very early, and these were underground. So we found that we located them and then we raised them. Here's a couple of headstones we found. You can see how bright they are because they've been underground, so they haven't been worn by the sun and the environment. And we're also raising, headstones raised. We're finding them underground, but we're also finding them that they're sunk a good foot or whatever, and you can see the dirt mark of where they were sunk.
Mhm.
We're straightening them up to get them out of the ground because some of the writing is underground. So we're finding more and more information about the people. Garden benches have been put all around the cemetery so people can come here and sit in the shade and have a quiet moment. We planted magnolia trees to beautify the cemetery this spring. And we've been planting flowers. There's a bunch of things called grave guards. And this one on the right here with the flowers in it, that's called a grave guard. And we have about 6 or 7 of those in the cemetery. And inside there is a round hole or rectangular hole where it just goes right to the dirt. And they were from Victorian times. We actually have an original ad from 1874 when they were patented. And they were designed to plant flowers into that hole, into that dirt there inside the grave guard. And so the board members decided that, we should do that. So we have all different flowers planted. We have some mums and things. We try to plant flowers that are going to bloom all year or in the spring and fall. So that's just an example of one of the things that we really feel strongly we want. It's part of our beautification of the cemetery.
Mhm.
Here's a couple more on the left here. So you can see we have some mums in this one. So we try to get these, and these are larger ones. You can put more plants in. But a lot of people have said the cemeteries never looked this good. So we feel really good about that. The cemetery wall has been restored all the way from the main gate, all the way now to, this is the front of the church here, but they've actually done the wall on the back of the church. So we're about, I'd say a third of the way around the 2-acre cemetery. The wall restoration is going to continue for a couple of years, obviously, because it takes quite a bit of money, and we need the money for that. So here's a before of what the wall behind the church looked like, and here's a picture of after it's restored. So it's absolutely incredible how nice everything looks. Nichols Construction comes and does the stone pointing and repair and everything. The rocks you see on the ground are ones that are left over, and they're bringing them around to patch other holes and fill other holes as they go around the cemetery. We think when they finally get done, there probably won't be a stone left because there's really some areas where trees have fallen and knocked the walls down. This is Jetson. He's our security officer and our operations manager for the whole site. So if you come up here, he'll come running out of the garage and he'll bark at you, but he loves everybody, and he'll check you in for the day so you can visit our church and cemetery. And the picture on the right was just one we took last winter during one of the snowstorms, and it was just a gorgeous site. So please come and visit and check out the church and cemetery. Everything's open. As Ann said, there's a lot of restoration work going on in the building this year, but we have it open for visitors, and we get visitors pretty much every single day. And I think my final slide is, so just some acknowledgements. The electric was done by RMB Electric. Nichols Construction was the ones who did all the stucco on the church. So they chipped off all the cracked stucco and repaired it and replaced it. And they're also doing the stone wall. ABBA Monuments and Pauli Memorials were the ones that did the 70 headstones that needed repair last year. Premium grade cabinetry are the folks who are doing the windows. that Ann showed you. 2 of the windows are done and the third one's out for
Mhm.
repair. New Life Furniture Solutions, they did the podium. E. Bauman Contracting, which happens to be a 12th generation Hollingsworth descendant. They did the
wow.
and the gutters. Michael's Paving did we paved the cemetery road. They did that. Just a lot of gratitude for the the Preservation Delaware Fund, the Delaware Cemetery Board, the Stress Cemetery Fund, which actually donates money every 18 months so we can repair the stones in the walls. That's where all the money for the cemetery work comes from.
Okay.
We had a Do More 24 Delaware donation this spring, and it was a big success. So thank you for all the people on our Facebook site who donated to that. Tim Carrere is our lawn care person, and he repaired the original iron gate for free this winter. So there's 2 more gates, and he's going to repair them for free too, because
Oh, wow.
I just love the cemetery. So Kathy Cloutier was our senator up until last November, and she paid for the first window to get started. The Welfare Foundation donated for the work that Ann was talking about. And we have a couple people who have really been historic connections and getting us in touch with other people. Kim Burdick, who lives, and her husband live in the Hale Burns house, if you've been there. And also Fleming Consulting, David Fleming and his wife have been very positive with us. And Larry Nagengast, can't say enough about him. He came and did articles and radio shows and things like that about this site. And that brought a whole lot of attention and a lot of donations to the work that's going on here. So, and finally, at the bottom, there are the board members that are currently on the board. You'll see that I'll mention Janet Bauman. She is actually a 11th generation Hollingsworth descendant from Valentine Hollingsworth. And Martha has is the Weldon person. So we like to keep historically those old names somehow attached to this church since they've been there forever. The other folks are all neighbors. So Cindy Davis lives in Normandy Manor, Joe Klusman's in Welshire, and Jamie Campbell's in Shelburne. So they surrounded the site. So I think that's my last slide. Yep. So thank you for listening. And if anybody has any questions, we'll open it up.
Hello. Oh, hello.
Yes, hi.
Yeah.
Hi. I think earlier you said there were still cemetery plots available.
Yes.
That's interesting. And who handles that? Have you had any recent purchases of cemetery plots?
Yes, we've had some recent purchases. I handle those arrangements. And actually, I don't think we mentioned the cemetery is very active, or still active rather. We have about 3 to 4 burials a year. The cemetery is open to residents of Brandywine 100 and their families. That's the only stipulation for this cemetery, is a family or a resident of Brandywine 100. But yes, there's still plots available. You can contact me and I can give you more information.
Okay.
Thank you.
You had said that Lombardy Hall was I'm not sure I understand, part of the original Hollingsworth land grant?
The land that Lombardy Hall is sitting on, yes.
And I assume that would mean also the Lombardy Cemetery.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, because that's where my family is buried.
Oh,
So,
okay, yes.
Yeah.
It's a nice cemetery there, yes.
yeah.
How would you actually get to the church? What roads do you take to get to the church and cemetery?
Okay, well, let's go from Aldersgate Methodist Church. If you go south on Concord Pike,
Yeah.
turn left on Murphy, it's Murphy there, heading towards Wilson. So you go through or cross over Falk, and then at the next intersection, there's a traffic light there, right?
Yeah.
That's Shipley Road, turn right on Shipley.
Mhm.
Then at the very next light, you can turn left onto Baynard Boulevard, like you're going to head out to Marsh Road. If you go down the hill, at the bottom of the hill, you'll see that first historical marker, and you can turn left onto Newark Union Public Road.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, come visit us, please. We're here
Kathy, I'll
all
be
the
glad
time.
to show you how to get there.
Yeah.
Okay, I've been back on those roads, but I never knew that it was back there.
Mhm.
Most people that come here have gone by that historic sign on Boehner Boulevard, and they said, I always wondered what was up here. And now
Yeah.
they're coming up here. In fact, I grew up a minute away from here and I never knew this existed. So I it's a little dead end road between
Yeah,
neighborhoods, and a lot of people said they never knew this thing was here, but now it's getting more attention. So we're getting we get visitors pretty much every day.
Just about every day.
that's great. That's
Mhm.
wonderful what you're
During
doing.
COVID, we had a lot of people visit because they were looking for another place to walk or another
Right.
bicycle or another place for a Sunday drive, and they drove up here, and we're just looking out for what's this road, where's this go, and came here, and we've met them and they learned about it too. So
Thank you.
you're
So
welcome.
I'm glad to hear that it's open because we've stopped by before and I was always like, we're trespassing. And my husband's like, now we really can go and look.
Stop back. Yeah, stop by. Like I said, we live right across the street. We're here almost all the time. So we'll be glad to show you the church, and we can talk about it for hours. We'll tell you the folks in the cemetery and such like that.
Is there a parking place? Or do you just park along the road, or is it a small parking?
There's a small driveway. You can pull right in front of the church.
Okay,
Yes.
Yep, and we're the second church on the left,
Oh, yes, right.
because there's the Shelburne Bible Church is the first one you'll see on the left, and then we're the old one right up the hill past the water tower.
Okay.
So a lot of people that come, they're sitting down the parking lot of Shelburne Bible Church to do work, and we're like,
Yeah, the
come on up,
vendors.
come on up. A lot of the so yeah.
Okay.
Church now just one room.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there's always been one room. We speculated that it was divided with a petition when it was a Quaker meeting house, but it still essentially was one room then too.
Mhm.
Stacy,
The vestibule, the separate entrance, but yeah, the sanctuary itself is one room.
Okay.
and they actually used to hold Sunday school classes in that one room. So you can imagine they were separated by pews.
Oh, okay.
Which I would think would be rather interesting if you were a Sunday school teacher.
Right, right. Yep.
So Bob, let me ask you a question. You said that, when you took over that you knew about 39 veterans, I think, and now you know about
69.
79. How do you find them?
So what we're doing is there's two ways we're finding them. One is we're taking a steel probe, and we probe in the ground,
Okay.
Mhm.
try to hit the top of a stone, and we're just picking. You see a space between two stones, and you think, well, is nobody here, or is somebody here, and where's the stone? And so you just probe around, and what you do is you hit the top of the stone. Every stone has sunk straight down. None have fallen over, other than the broken ones that have been repaired. But every one we found underground has gone straight down. Some have sunk over 2 feet
Wow.
into the ground. Yeah, some of the
Mhm.
stones are 2 feet tall, and you can barely see the top of them. Like, you don't see the top of them. And then what we do is when we hit something, then we dig down around it to see if it's the top of the stone. If it is, then we excavate it, bring it up, and then we pack clay back underneath and set it back in place and restore it. Currently we've done 150, and we already know where there's 50 or 60 more.
And
Wow.
that's based on the records, right? The
It's-
white
yeah.
book.
Yeah, and some of the field stones, that 1788 field stone, now that wasn't on any record, that wasn't
Mhm.
anywhere.
Mm-mm.
In fact, most of the headstones that we've lifted were not on any record. So they had sunk a long, long time ago, and whoever did the records never saw them.
Mhm.
But we still have 50 or 60 more, and we really haven't even finished probing the cemetery. So we know there's more, and some of them prominent families. You're finding the footstones or the headstones, so it's really interesting to see what's coming up and
Yes.
adding history to the site.
Mhm.
So and as for the veterans, when we first moved in the house, that first Memorial Day, the Boy Scouts came to put flags on the veterans' graves, and they had a list of 39 veterans. Well, they gave us that list, so we started with that. And Bob has done research on the old section, so he's actually delved into different research sites, some archive sites that he know of that connect the families, and have found more of the veterans there, and some of the war sites that list soldiers from different areas. And then I've been working on the news section. I've been trying to get obituaries for everybody in the news section. So Martha's actually helped with that. She's found some obituaries from old newspapers. And so and it'll say in there that they served in the Army and then came home and worked at the Bank of Delaware or for DuPont and things like that. Then also we've learned about many veterans from the families that have visited, especially at Christmas time. There was a lot of families that came to decorate the graves. But even throughout the year, they'll come and say, hey, well, my father he served in the Army in World War II. And so we're able to learn about him and then get more flags and put them the veterans on our list and get them a medallion marker and a flag. So yeah, we actually just learned of 3, 2 weeks ago? Yeah, a family member came and said, hey, my brother and my father were veterans. So we enjoy doing that too.
Just one final, the other way we're finding stones is we have a ground penetrating radar. So we're using that to find disturbances in the ground, which then show that there could be some type of stone or something there, and then we can probe, and then we can excavate the stone and see if it is a stone or it's just a brand new 100 rock, which there's a lot of them in the cemeteries too. So we're right now we're doing about, I'd say 80 to 85% of what you probe turns out to be a real stone. There's about 15% that turns into be a brand new 100 rock, and fill that back in. So
I have a question for you. You had a really old property record there that was in a book. Where did you find that? The original Valentine Hollingsworth property record.
your map,
Oh, that one, what the map?
the map of the property,
Yeah,
your slide.
the slide that I showed that drew the property boundaries of being Carr Road, or now Bayer Boulevard, Shellpot Creek and Wilson and such. That one, I had to go back to that slide and double check it. But that map showed the property line, but then also there are records that describe land grants. Let me see, that was in, we have a textbook that was written in 1939 on the Hollingsworth family. And that started with the land grant that Valentine received from William Penn. So we have a lot of historic documents from there.
I think that one, so when we bought this house 3.5 years ago, so this is 3 stone walls of Valentine Hollingsworth's original house from 1683 is where we live. And the lady who sold it to us had been doing research on Valentine Hollingsworth and the house. And she left us a whole folder of information. That map might have been something she Xeroxed when she went down and did the Historical Society and deed checking.
Research, yeah.
So we have to go back and look at where that was, but somehow we inherited that. It's not something we found.
Yeah. There's a Schaefer's book on Delaware history, and he has a reference in there to this property being owned by Valentine Hollingsworth. So there's a lot of documentation on the land grants that William Penn gave out to many different people.
Wow.
It's fascinating.
Well, thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
questions too. We appreciate that.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I don't want to rush it, but if there aren't, then.
And please come up and see us.
Yes.
Thank you, Ann and Bob, very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you, Martha.
And thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Oh,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
You're welcome.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
It really is.
I would like to close with a prayer, a quick prayer.
Okay.
This will be familiar to most of the UMW ladies.
Mhm.
May the blessings of God Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit rest upon us and all our work and worship in his name. May he give us light to guide us, courage to support us, and love to unite us now and forevermore. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for attending as well.
That was really interesting.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
Bye.
you.
We're going to sign off.
See you,
Bye-bye.
Martha.
Bye. Thanks, Ann.
All right. Thanks again, Ann and Bob.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.